I'm talking about is the introduction to this series to understand DevOps. And as the title said, we want to understand what DevOps is, and more importantly, what DevOps isn't, because there's a lot of pitfalls that people come into when they're trying to understand DevOps. So I want to try and cover some of those and make sure that that people have got a really good understanding so that they're able to help their customers really strongly. So I'm Kimball, my Twitter handle is DRRK, feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm a senior developer advocate for Chef. I've got 20 years experience in the industry across development, operations, training and consulting, and I'm particularly passionate about automation, or in other words, I'm fairly lazy. I like to try and make the computer do the work for me. And that's, I think, something that's really important, and we'll come into that in more detail. So, what is DevOps? Well, if you ask Wikipedia, they'll say DevOps is a set of practices that combine software development, dev, and IT operations, ops. It aims to shorten the systems development's lifecycle and provide continuous delivery with high software quality. This is the general kind of definition of DevOps that you'll hear quite a lot. It's devs and ops working together in perfect harmony and wonderful software lifecycle. But the thing is, this is really a very shallow understanding of it. And I want to go in and sort of cover some of these things, and by the end of it, we'll come up with a different definition of DevOps. There's nothing wrong as such with this definition, but because it just, people will read it and they'll think that DevOps is going to give them this wonderful silver bullet to solve all their problems. And in fact, there's really a lot of pitfalls and a lot of things you have to think about. And my alternative definition at the end will, I think, help people understand a better way to think about it that still encompasses the same ideas. So let's think about why people embrace DevOps. There's a number of reasons why people might embrace DevOps, and different reasons will come from whether the movement is coming from the practitioners in the company or whether it's coming from the management in the company. But essentially, a lot of the things that come around are these things here. People talk a lot about inflexible, rigid practices, slow systems, faulty fault recovery. I'll explain that a little bit more later. Lack of control, not being able to feel like they know that they have the ability to make the changes they want to do. And finally, people just think it's better than what we have. And that's a reason, and it's a good reason, but it's, again, something we wanted to look at in a bit more detail. So I'm going to work through each of these. I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that people see as DevOps as being why DevOps is the solution, and then we'll talk a little bit about the reality. So let's take off the start. People have inflexible, rigid practices within their operation, and they believe that DevOps, by creating a cross-functional DevOps team, this is going to allow them for more flexibility and autonomy, which it makes a lot of sense. You know, you see this, we see talks about this, we see articles about this, we see Gartner reports about this, that when you create this cross-functional DevOps team, that's going to make life much easier. And there's some truth to that. But the problem is, the first thing, if you create a DevOps team, you've just created a new team. It's in a new silo. So all you've got now is you've presumed quite often you still have a devs team and you have an ops team, then they are siloed, and then you have a DevOps team, which is siloed from both, which isn't really very helpful. On their own, a new team isn't going to actually help you, but cross-team communication that builds trust will help. And on top of that, once you realize, okay, we need cross-team communication, we need to build trust. How do we go about building that? Well, we can build trust when we start thinking about, well, why is it that we've had this lack of flexibility, this lack of autonomy, these processes that have caused us problem in the past? Well, there's often a lack of trust due to the fact that things have gone wrong in the past. Well, you need to start building up a record of things going right. You need to build up a record of the ability to prove that when you're going to release some software, for example, it's not going to cause a headache to the operations team. You don't need to have developers sitting in the operations team to do this. You need the developers and the operations team and all the other teams to be able to understand, communicate, raise their issues, and talk to each other. And also proof. Proof is a really important thing. This is where the tooling can be really helpful, because you start to have automation. We start to have testing and monitoring and all these kind of tools, which helps us prove what's going on, and also meaning we'll get consistency. The same thing happens every single time, which is really, really important. And impartiality is another part of things. People are more likely to trust something that they can see and understand and know hasn't got any kind of spin on it. If people can see, look, yes, we had these tests failed, it was resolved in this amount of time, etc. People understand that. They know that that's an impartial view of reality, rather than people saying, well, you know, it wasn't really our fault, somebody else did this about you. Like, that's not the right thing. So automation helps for that, and we'll go into a little bit more about tooling and stuff and how that does and doesn't help as we go along. Slow systems, and by slow systems, I'm not talking here about a computer running slowly, a server running slowly. I'm talking about the ability to get from having a machine ready to be run, talking about how you go about your release cycle, how you go about getting a problem fixed when you've got some kind of fault in your production system. We're not talking about, you know, we're talking about the human systems being slow and the reasons behind it as well. So the myth here again is DevOps tooling will make everything go faster, and that people will think that because they see all these reports again of, you know, install Chef and use Azure, everything gets better. But that's not really the truth. The thing is, the reality is the tooling is important. The tooling does help, but it's not a silver bullet to provide this answer to your problems of the systems being slow. Again, what we really need here is we use tools to support agile processes. Now, agile processes back from the software development style, and in fact really older than that, is about being flexible in how you do things, making sure everybody knows what's going on. So we're talking things here like, you know, making sure you have version control, obviously, but version control needs to not just be your software, but everything about your system. We talk about the coded enterprise in Chef. Now, the software is going to be supporting that as well. But we're also talking about monitoring and reporting and, you know, Kanban boards, if that's the way you want to go, or anything like that. It's tools that allow people to see what's going on and to understand what's going on so that they can have trust that your faster processes aren't going to be compromising the integrity of the software or the company. Small manageable changes. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to be like Google or Netflix or what have you, releasing software every 5 seconds. This means that when you make a change, it's isolated in a way that you can understand what impact that change has. You can still make your releases on a monthly, 6-monthly, annual basis if that's right for your industry. But you need to make the actual changes to being small and manageable and having automated testing and pipelines. Faulty fault recovery. This is a big one. A lot of people in big industries, they have issues where they have a major outage and it takes a long time to resolve, and then they look at startups and what have you and see how quickly people can solve things through the magic of DevOps. And this is another one. People believe, because so many DevOps type companies are talking about how they can release software so quickly, that DevOps takes away the risk. And it's not entirely true, but it's also not entirely untrue. It's the use of source control, making small changes, and proactive monitoring that is reducing the risk. But none of these things are DevOps as such. They are about making things different, making things controlled, making things understood, and more importantly, communicating with everybody. Because if you have source control and you can see the changes through, and you have a good communication chain throughout your whole operation, people will be able to highlight things saying, well, I think that change is going to have a risk because of this factor that you don't know about because it's not part of your domain. And so you're able to move faster from that point of view. But also by having source control and small changes and proactive monitoring, you're also able to revert changes, to get rid of problems. If they occur, you can revert them very, very fast because you understand much more precisely what happened. And as I say, I think that another really important thing here is trust. We build trust between the different teams, which means potential issues are discussed. Now, this is not a new thing. ITIL had the concept of the change board. Unfortunately, in a lot of ITIL implementations, people felt like the change board was not a means for discussing and removing risk of changes to be made. It was a big block of people that said no to everything. And the structure of ITIL, I think, was down to the fact that people, it was a rigid seeming system with very rigid tools that imposed it in a one way only, rather than being a more flexible system that is based on communication and trust, rather than based on what ITIL comes across of as a lot of people as being based on strict controls and gates. And so whilst this idea of small changes and communication has always existed in previous implementation ways, DevOps has made it seem more understandable and has changed the focus. Another thing that a lot of people talk about in their organizations is, and when they want to embrace DevOps and they don't believe they could embrace DevOps, is that they have a lack of control. They don't have the ability to control what's going on. Ironically, the picture I'm using in the background is very well known as Disaster Girl, but what's going on actually in this picture is not any kind of lack of control whatsoever. This is a testing site, a training site for the fire personnel here. There was no lack of control going on at all, which is an ironic photo to use for this. But and I think that's important because the perceived lack of control isn't really a lack of control, but a lack of trust. And by building up trust, you're able to regain this control. Now, people think that DevOps just gives them control from these pen pushers they see, the people in the change board, the people that are, in the security team saying, no, you've got to do this audit before you can release. This is not a useful thing to think about. But because the reality is it takes time to build trust, and the processes from the likes of ITIL are actually important. You need to have processes, but what you need to do is take that style of process and bring automation and tooling to it in a way that you're able to fully understand what's going on. Everything is happening in a streamlined, fast, and consistent manner. And so you don't get control back through DevOps, you get control back by understanding the situation, making sure everything is planned out properly, but in a way that is fast and with the high velocity. Testing, documentation with consistent processes and responsibilities. This is also an important thing. Responsibilities need to be shared. This is something that is going to come in quite a lot when Galen gives his talk, but we need to think about how everyone has responsibility for security, everybody has responsibility for quality, everybody has responsibility for production. By having that shared responsibility, then people will be much happier about talking about the issues by making sure that they have this communication stages, and the fact that then they will understand more of how they need to achieve the velocity for the business value that they want. And finally, we want DevOps because it's better than before. It's better everywhere else. The grass is always greener on the other side. The myth, everything's better for the developer and operations team. Absolutely. It can be. It's not a magic trick though. It's not just saying, hey, we're DevOps now, everything's better. It's trust and collaboration. It's shared across the entire organization, not just the dev team and the operations team, but the whole organization. Everybody should understand what their purpose is in the organization. Everybody should understand what the organization is trying to do and how essentially the organization makes money. And DevOps as a movement is about bringing in the communication to be able to handle this. It started with the developer team and the operations team. It started with trying to get agile processes into operations, but it's not just that. It's so much more. And this trust and collaboration is so very important. So let's come back. Why should we embrace DevOps? We should embrace DevOps because it improves communication. It allows you to build trust in each other within the different teams, with understanding not just the developer teams, the operations teams, but the security teams, having trust in those teams, and you having trust in the security team and knowing why they're doing what they're doing. It's in having trust in the business team, making the right decisions. It increases velocity. Like, if you do it right, you will increase velocity because you're far more cooperative, you're understanding what's going on, and you're actually able to make sure that you're only doing what needs to be done. By having small changes we talked about, you can see very quickly whether a change you're making is actually useful or not, so you can stop early. Fail fast is a thing that's talked about a lot, and this isn't in the sense of making a release and it breaking and repairing it. It's about being able to change quickly, understand what you were doing is the wrong way, the wrong thing, but not having a massive impact on your productivity by doing so. DevOps will improve the customer experience. It will allow you, by implementing things from the DevOps world, you will have proactive monitoring. You'll understand when things are going wrong quickly. Your customer isn't going to be as affected by problems. You're able to have, because you've got that trust, to be able to start maybe releasing faster, if that makes sense, or organizational changes so that you know what's going on. It allows you to think about, well, what is the customer's going to be wanting, what's going to make things better for the customer, and you can feed that back into the development process much faster. And it allows you to embrace manageable flexibility. Now, I say manageable flexibility because you don't want to have a free-for-all. You don't want everybody to be able to just do what they want. You need to have controls around it. And you have this with pipelines, and you have this with human-free zones and security measures and all those various buzzwords. But by having this manageable flexibility, people will feel better about their job. They'll feel more empowered as a result. So this is my definition of DevOps. I say DevOps is the building of trust and communication across the organization to promote fast, agile, secure, and reliable software development operation in order to build your business value in the most sustainable way possible. And if you want to learn more on this, we've got a wonderful course on learn.chef.io, which is to transform your organization with DevOps. This has a number of articles from people in the industry. There's some videos to follow, and it covers a lot of these different things. It covers the tooling. It covers a lot of the things I've talked about. And so if you sign up to Learn Chef on learn.chef.io, you'll be able to access those. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Feel free to come off mute if there are any outstanding questions.
Nothing at all?
I'm also looking on the event post for any questions. Checking here, but no, there are no additional questions there.
Okay, no problem. Well, thank you very much for your time. I hope that people have learned from this and that it's useful. The next sessions are going to be absolutely excellent as well, so I definitely recommend watching those future sessions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As I said, feel free to reach out to me on DRRK on Twitter or kj@chef.io.
Thank you, Kimball. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you everyone for joining the call. We will actually post the recording of this call on the Microsoft Partner Community, and hope to see you next week in the second episode of the Thought Leadership series with Chef. Thank you all.